a topic that is a topic that's of interest to a lot of people, and then your interest in your community as well. So we thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here. Can you hear me okay in the back? We don't have audio equipment. Again, we didn't expect such a large crowd, but it's all good. Just wanted to do a few housekeeping things real quick. Did everybody get to fill out a little green sheet? Okay, then you'll be entered in our door prizes, which will probably hold till the end a little bit. Keep you all here. I know the topic will be interesting enough to do that though. My name is Mary Weaver and I'm the chair of the Little Bear Forest Reform Coalition. It's a long name, so we call ourselves LBFRC. And out on the table there's some little cards that have some information about our organization. This is a collaborative effort with many other organizations in the area and agencies, and those include the BIA Mesclero Forestry, ENMU-Ruidoso Community Education, the County of Lincoln, Lincoln National Forest, New Mexico State Forestry, South Central Mountain RC&D, and the Village of Ruidoso Forestry, and some private citizens, and I might even have missed an organization or two. But the bottom line is the forest health is such an important issue in this community and communities across the country that all of these agencies and entities are working together to help to have some outreach so that citizens can become more informed. Because we do live in a WUI. Who can tell me what a WUI is? Wildland Urban Interface, and we need your help in educating other people as you go out of here as to that we live in a WUI, and we need to learn how to live in a WUI so that we're all safe and our forests are healthy. So this is the first session of a speaker series that we're starting, and the next one will be November 5th. It's the first Tuesday of each month, and then we have one in December. I believe it's December 3rd. And we have different topics and different agencies heading up the discussions of those different topics. So I think it's going to be a very, very good series. In the spring, we're planning to host a Forest Health Expo with bringing in speakers and having a lot more information on one day. But we're very encouraged by the turnout tonight, and we hope that y'all will help us spread the word, and we'll get more people back next month. Tonight, as you saw in the advertising, our topic is what's bugging my trees, because of course what's going on with our trees that are brown has got everybody kind of concerned. And so we brought in a lady, well actually she's here locally, she's with the Lincoln National Forest and has given this presentation in other parts of the state and is very knowledgeable on these topics. We also have some other professionals in the room that will chime in and answer questions later on. So with that, I know it's a little warm in here. We're trying to get things pulled up, but just feel free to take off a couple layers, get comfortable, and let's help me welcome Ms. Sharon Paul, Lincoln National Forest.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for coming. I am an employee at the Lincoln National Forest, but today I'm just a private citizen. Giving disinfectant disease talk. I am not doing this as an employee. So as you know, non-essential employees were furloughed today. I'm in that category, believe it or not. So what we're going to do tonight is, I have given this a few times. I always start by saying, there's a reason I chose forestry as a profession and thought I would be spending my time in the woods by myself, not in front of rooms full of people. So if you can't hear, or I'm mumbling or talking too fast, because I'm from the Midwest, just holler at me. We'll be interactive tonight. If you have questions, raise your hand. This is really informal. I want to give you information. We have other folks back here. Dick Cook, he's the village forester, and he's going to help me out with any questions. And Frank Silva is back there. Bill Hornsby, silviculturist with the reservation. So we'll just be real informal, and if you stump me, I'm sure one of them can answer it. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation to go through. I have some samples up here that we'll be talking about. I brought a map. It's 2012, which is the latest that they have in map form. They're still compiling 2013 data. And this some basic information on some of the insects, if you want to read it off of the poster up here. So So we're gonna be using all of those things tonight, and you feel free to come up later and look at this stuff up here after the PowerPoint is completed. And then I'll explain the map at the end. Don't let me forget to do that, because it's all numbers. It's a pretty weird map until you figure out how to read it. So, what's going on? Why are we all here? Why is the room packed? We're seeing a lot of red on our landscape. And we need to back up first and think of it as the landscape and why that's happening here. And as we all know, we've been in a dry cycle, and we've had 3 dry winters. So that's really exacerbated our problem. The trees aren't in very good shape. The other issue is there's a lot more trees out on that landscape now than historically there ever was. So we have a lot more trees fighting for a lot fewer resources, such as water and nutrients out of the soil. So that makes all of the trees very stressed. And stressed trees smell very good to insects. They sense that. All of these insects that we're going to talk about tonight are native to the area. They've always been here. They always will be. But their population is usually kept in check because the trees are pretty healthy. When the trees are healthy and have water, the trees have a defense mechanism we'll talk about. And there's also predators and parasites that take out a lot of the insects. But the insects do a job as far as killing a few trees out in the forest, creating snags for wildlife, creating openings so we can start the new forest. The new trees need sunlight, the seeds need sunlight to germinate. And so they've always been a part of the system, and they always will be. It's just that what we're seeing right now is epidemic populations. It's gotten out of whack, and it's because stand densities are very high. There's way more trees on the landscape than there ever was. They're very stressed because of the drought. So that's what's putting us here. Let's see what's actually affecting our trees out here. Forget that you saw a national forest on there. This is Sharon Paul civilian. Can we turn down the lights? I've worked in Wyoming and seen mountain pine beetle take out large stands of trees that killed a whole mountain in 3 years. I've worked in Washington State, and I saw spruce budworm take out thousands of acres of fir on the Yakima Reservation. And now here we're seeing these insect outbreaks. I've been accused that maybe it's me, but it happens on the landscape. And when we see it on a landscape scale, it's a pretty impressive disturbance. It's thousands of trees, and it can cover thousands of acres. If you traveled up to the northern part of the state in 2002, you saw all those pinon trees die. That was pretty impressive too, especially the year that they're red. What happens is the trees turn red, and they're very obvious, and the needles stay on for a year. And then the needles fall off, and the trees kind of turn gray, and then they kind of blend back into the landscape and then they stand. The ponderosa pine tree will stand for 7 to 10 years or longer even, and then they fall down. So when they're red needled, they really stand out on the landscape, and it looks like, oh man, everything's dying. So what's killing this? What's killing the trees out there? We're going to go through a couple of different types of insects. There's defoliator insects, which eat the needles of the trees. And then there's the bark beetles, which get under the bark and actually kill the trees. And I am not an entomologist. I'm not a bug expert. I'm a forester, and I'm trained in silviculture. So I need to know about these bugs on the landscape because I prescribe treatments for stands of trees, and what we need to do to keep the forest healthy. And this is just part of the forest health issue. So my identifying these insects and understanding them in general terms, I'm not going to get real scientific. That's an entomologist, and then for a pathologist would be the diseases. So this is going to be a lot more general, and it's going to be in the terms of what we're doing out in the forest, on the national forest, in the state forest, in the village, to address some of these issues and learn about what some of these insects are doing. If you drove to Cloudcroft in 2008 and you saw on highway where 244 met 82 just before you go into town, you saw all those dead fir trees. That was this Pipiaginite, it was a looper. It just showed up on the landscape, lots of trees there, lots of stress trees. It killed a lot of trees in that area. Some of them have been harvested. And then the population crashed. So this is a defoliator. And what happens is usually when the trees are in good condition and they're healthy trees, this critter will defoliate, will eat some needles, but the tree will survive. Well, what's happening on our landscape now is the trees are not in good shape. They aren't healthy. They don't have a lot of water and nutrients available to them. So these insects are killing the trees in 1 year or 2 years. But the looper was the one that attacked all those fir trees up around Cloudcroft. Another one that's affecting Cloudcroft that is all fir trees is the Douglas fir tussock moth. They had these caterpillars all over in town. And it also eats the needles of the trees. And when you go out in the forest, you can tell the trees have been munched on. And again, this insect usually doesn't kill the tree, but it has been killing a lot of the spruce in Cloudcroft just because of the way that the trees are very stressed right now. This is another defoliator that we have on the landscape. Western spruce budworm, again, it looks really dramatic and you can see it on the landscape. This thing gets in the buds and eats the buds. It's a moth. And I wanted to show you in that bottom right just that all of these insect populations cycle. Sometimes the trees win, sometimes the insects win, sometimes the insect populations then get very high. And so that's what we're looking at just on that squiggly graph, that their populations go up and then they crash and they go down. See those webs out there with all those nasty little caterpillars in it that are on the broadleaf trees? This is the western tent caterpillar. And I saw that moth on my porch. And I thought, man, that's a pretty moth. And then I looked it up and I thought, that needs to go pretty somewhere else. The thing with this insect is if you prune off the branch that has the webworms on it and the web, and you get rid of that, you've taken care of the problem. So this one, if you have it in your yard, it's pretty easy to take care of. If you have it on the landscape, in all the aspen trees, that's a different story. We're not going to be able to go prune some of that stuff off. So scale is really important when you're talking about these insects. There's not a lot we're going to be able to do over the large landscape scale, but we'll talk about some of the things that you can do in the small scale if you have some high value trees. And one of them is, if you have this insect and you see those webs, prune it off and get rid of it, and you've gotten rid of this pest. Now we're getting into the one that's really causing us a lot of problems here around Ruidoso, the bark beetles. You see the red trees, the crowns that are fading. You see the pitch tubes, that's the defense that the tree has. When the tree has plenty of moisture and an insect bores into the tree, because what the insect wants to do is bore under the bark and lay eggs, mate and lay eggs. So if the tree has enough water available to it, it'll produce sap. We call it pitch. It's real sticky stuff, and it'll pitch that insect out. So the tree does have some of its own defense. But what's happening now is we've had dry winters. The trees go into the springtime very dry. The insects are flying in the spring, so a lot of times now we're not even seeing that the trees are able to produce any of that pitch to defend themselves. So a lot of the attacks that we're seeing on these stressed trees are successful. And when the insects get in there, and you can tell by boring dust, and we have some of that up here, but in the pitch and the woodpeckers and the red fading trees, that's telling you that you have it on the landscape. And you guys can come up and look at these later, but when I talk about galleries here too, what I'm talking about are these galleries, these egg galleries that you see underneath the bark. When you peel the bark off a tree that you know insects have been in, you'll see these patterns underneath there. So we'll be talking about that. But that's telling you you have insects on the landscape, and that's telling you those trees are trying to defend themselves, but right now the insects are winning. One important thing to know then, if you have beetles, is what kind, because there are several. There are dendroctonous beetles, there are Ips beetles, and like I told you, I'm not an entomologist, so I've got to carry my book around with me and look at, and how we diagnose this is those galleries all have different patterns. So you look at the different patterns, and that tells you, that gives you a clue as to what insect is making that pattern. If it's really squiggly, looks like spaghetti, and the trees have been hit in the fall, you're starting to see some of those pitch tubes in the fall. It's brown-headed pine beetle.
What size bug is that compared to?
That's probably a little bit bigger than a grain of rice, a big grain of rice. There's thousands of them that hit the tree. So they'll hit the tree, they'll go under the bark, they'll mate. What happens is, if they have a successful entry, they release chemicals called pheromones that tell all the other bugs of that type, this is a good place. This tree can't defend itself, come here. And so they aggregate on that tree. Then they'll send out a pheromone that says this tree's full, go somewhere else. So they're, it's pretty interesting. You're a bug person. I'm a tree person, and I don't like it when they do that. So this is what it looks like when you peel the bark off the tree, and a round-headed pine beetle has been in there. It's squiggly like spaghetti. But this is a dendroctonous beetle. The dendroctonous beetles, the galleries underneath are packed with frass, which is the sawdust stuff. The stuff that comes off as their frass. And when you come up here, if you come up here and look at some of this, you can see that there's some of those galleries are packed with that stuff. So that's also telling us that that's a dendroctonous beetle, which is this beetle.
And are you saying they're in flight now, since we're in fall?
That one is, yes. And that's why it's important to know which insect you're dealing with too, because some of them overwinter as adults, some of them overwinter as larvae. It might tell you what you want to use if you want to do some control. It'll tell you when they're going to be flying, the adults, into the next tree, into the next victim. So that one does fly in the fall. Western pine beetle looks the same. The bug looks the same. They're very hard to tell apart unless you're a bug person, if you want to count spines or look at antennae or things like that. I don't want to do that. I can look and tell that the western pine beetle is in the outer bark. So if you have a lot of woodpecker activity, because that's the buffet for the woodpeckers, that's one of their predators, and that's one of their controls, is it's probably a western pine beetle. It's still a dendroctonous, so it still have packed frass. It has a little bit different type of galleries, but it's still a bark beetle. It's still one that's getting in the bark and mating and laying eggs, and the larvae are in the bark. This is the one that's really doing a number on a lot of the pine around here. A lot of the ponderosa pine, I would say the majority of what you're seeing around Ruidoso is Ips. Those other two beetles we looked at are one generation a year, one flight, generally. This one can have 2 to 4. Because of our mild climate, also we've been having, the bugs are winning now, right? Mild climate, dense stress trees. What this insect used to do was just build up in the logging slash or the small stuff. If there was a lightning strike or a wind throw, something that would happen in the forest to a tree, and it would be laying on the ground dead, then these insects would live in that. Now their populations have built up so high, they're hitting live trees. And like I said, this one can have 2 to 4 generations. And with our climate that we've had lately, our weather that we've had lately, real mild, I would say that we're closer to 4. And so that's why this one has been so destructive on the landscape, because it has so many generations in a season. And you can tell the difference. This one has a scooped out butt. So if you look at the insect itself and you're looking down at it and its hind end is scooped out, it's this insect. They're all the same, about the same size. The other Dendrophilus are black. This one's kind of brownish, can be black. They all are about the same size, a little bit bigger than a grain of rice. This one has a scooped out butt and different galleries. This one does not have brass pack galleries, and it has this wishbone is kind of the telltale sign of hips. Also gets in pinon. So if you think you have pinon trees and you're safe, no. What we saw in the very beginning was the pinon yips really took a toll on all of the pinon trees up in the northern part of the state in 2002. So it attacks pinon also. If you have Douglas fir, you don't have pine and you have some Douglas fir, well, you have a beetle too. All of these trees have at least one insect, and on this bark that I have up here, I was looking at some dead pine. There's multiple insects in that tree. There was the round-headed and hips. So there's sometimes multiple agents in the same tree. A lot of times what will happen with the Douglas fir is it'll get chewed on, it'll get defoliated by one of those defoliator insects, the caterpillars that we saw in the beginning, and the beetles, it'll stress the tree and then the beetles will come finish it off. But this one attacks Douglas fir, so that's another way we diagnose what's out there, what's attacking things on the landscape. We have so many things going on right now. If it's hitting Douglas fir, it could be this beetle. And if the beetles aren't enough, then there's a blue stain fungus that comes in with the beetle. And what this does is plug up the pipes in the tree, the cambium layer, the phloem, the xylem, what's transporting water and nutrients up and down the stem of the tree will get plugged up by the mycelia, this fungus, and it chokes the tree, it kills the tree. So even if the tree has this blue stain fungus in it, it's going to die. And this is carried in by all of those beetles. And it discolors the wood, doesn't affect the strength of the wood. So this is very bad for like pine if you want to use it for molding or something like that, but it doesn't affect the strength of the wood. But it still deteriorates the wood because it's discolored and then people don't want to use it for those things. So we don't like even, and all of these trees when they're dead, they immediately start decaying. So if you have dead trees out there on the landscape, and you want to capture some value from it or some volume, you have to move pretty quickly. What can we do? Well, if the tree's infested already, there's nothing you can do to save that tree. So if you're seeing boring dust, or those pitch tubes, or the fading crown, the bugs probably aren't even in that tree anymore. They've gone on to the green trees. The insects are not in the red trees anymore. But if you have trees that you think the insects are in, you see those signs on a green tree, the insects are still in that tree, you can cut it down, but what you really need to be conscious of is don't take that wood somewhere where the same type of tree is going to be exposed. So don't take firewood, don't cut a ponderosa pine up with beetles in it, and take it to your home, to your yard, where there's ponderosa pine. You're going to infect your ponderosa pine. If you're going to take down any trees that have insects in them, we suggest putting plastic over your piles so the sun can heat that up and kill the insects that are in there. So that's a pretty cheap, easy way to get rid of the insects that are already in your wood. The other thing is anything that dries it out. Chipping it, peeling it, because what they need is some moisture underneath that bark. If it's not moist underneath that bark, they can't use it. If you have a lot of slash, or you've cut a lot of trees and it's laying there and it's still, there's still moisture under the bark, that's a bug motel. So you want, especially with ips, so you need to get rid of that. Or if your neighbor's doing work, I've seen a lot of that around, your neighbor's doing work, there's a big slash pile there. You need to keep an eye on it, you need to make sure that that gets moved off, or if it's on your property, so it doesn't affect your trees. So removal from the site is the best thing.
If you do the solarization, then could you burn that wood later?
Yes.
It could be used later.
Yes, and you can burn it anytime, even if you don't solarize it, but if you don't want the insects to get out and go affect other trees, put some plastic in it.
So when they're cutting trees and getting these piles of wood, like how soon after a tree's cut does it need to be removed? Like days or?
No, months. It'll take the ips beetle, they'll have to find that pile, which will be probably pretty fast right now.
But if it's a tree that's cut down that has the yips in it, so the dead tree.
I would move it as soon as you can move it.
But I guess you're saying the brown trees, if you're cutting down those dead trees, the bugs.
They're
are
gone
in.
already.
It's the
Most
green
likely they're gone
So
already.
it's the green trees that have.
That's what I've been
signs.
finding. Do you guys have any comments back there about that, Dick or?
No, we're finding the same thing you're talking about.
Sharon, if I could just mention one thing about that solarization. What we're seeing is if people don't get that tight seal, or the plastic rips, or the sun kind of bakes it and cracks it, it becomes ineffective, because you're basically multiplying those beetles, and then they're releasing on their own. So you've got to make sure you have a tight seal all the way around and the wind doesn't blow it off.
Can you spray the wood pile?
I wouldn't recommend that, especially if you're gonna use the wood for anything. And plastic's pretty cheap. I would wrap it before I would spray. We'll talk about spraying though. Question.
Question back here. Does it make any difference if you use clear or black plastic? I understood the black plastic would heat up and maybe kill them faster, or?
I think either one, as long as you're getting that heat, it needs to be in the sun. Don't pile it in the shade and put plastic on it and think that's gonna work. It really needs to be out in the sun, and I haven't heard of any difference of black or clear as long as it's in the sun and you're getting that heat buildup in there. For how long? How long to keep the plastic on? What do you guys recommend?
2 months.
Couple months.
But just to be clear, if the tree is brown, I mean it's clearly dead, this covering with the lumber with plastic is pointless because you said the bugs are already gone. Is that correct?
Well, not necessarily that. There's other insects that I don't have in here too that are wood borers that'll be in that wood. Some of those insects will reinfest the tree. What I would do is those red trees, the bark is going to come off really easy. I would take some of that bark. If you're cutting the tree down anyway, peel back some of that bark and see if those insects are still in there. Some of them may reinfest the same tree. Most of them are not going to. They're going to fly off and hit green trees. But they can reinfest the same tree. So the only way you're really going to know that is if you look. And it's pretty easy to do. Just peel that bark back and take a look underneath, and you'll see those galleries, and you'll see if there's any insects, if there's any adults, or if there's any larvae under there. Yeah, go ahead.
No sprays available for tree infested trees is pretty black and white, but there's an awful lot of folks out there selling sprays that I've listened to lately that are supposed to kill them.
That's probably for your green trees, not for the trees that already have the insects in them. Or they might be selling you a bill of goods if they're telling you they can save a tree that has insects in it already. Because we saw that blue stain comes in with the insects. So I wouldn't
Well, if
spend
they
money
started
spraying.
losing, there's some white needles on it, and they've started losing a few, but it's not completely dead. I mean,
If you want to take a chance on it,
there's no science to back it up, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of the trees that we have, mainly most of the ones that we're losing, only die at the top. The thing girdles about halfway up the tree. Is, if we top those trees, will they live, or is that the end of
Well,
it?
some of these insects will just start at the top of the tree. If it's killed the top of the tree,